How's it going, everybody? My name is Snazzy Patty, and today we are checking out a video by Dumanity. This video is called Why the US Prison System is Failing. Now, as always, the link to the original video will be down in the description below. Now, without further ado, let's go.
US has the largest and most expensive prison system in the world. Surely we have the best prison system, right?
It's honestly pretty sad how bad our prison system is compared to other countries. Like, we have so much money, and other countries off in like Norway and mostly the Scandinavian prisons I've noticed are significantly well off. I don't. In general, the Scandinavian countries are really good. They got good education, good healthcare. They're really happy people, really beautiful people, good prison. Like they are pretty high on all statistics. It's kind of crazy, honestly. I wonder how they do it. But yeah, America, get your shit together. This is crazy. Yeah.
Okay, well, at least we locked up all the criminals, so the US must be safe, right?
Hell no.
0.7% of the US population is in prison or jail. Yet the US still has the highest crime rate among all developed countries. That's because our prisons don't decrease crime. They actually do the opposite. Violent criminals are a problem, so it'd be pretty nice if we could just lock them up until they stop being violent. But life isn't a fairy tale. Many criminals actually become even more violent after their time in prison. The US Department of Justice found that 21.8% of prisoners committed a violent crime.
Because, man, the prison system is it's not even necessarily the prison system for this. Like, yes, they definitely play a role in it, but I also feel like a large portion of it is due to the actual culture inside of jail and prison. The rules, the respect, the way things are done, how things get done. And I don't mean like by the prison system or by the prisoners. I meant inmate to inmate. They have a different way of life than civilian life outside of the prison. And if you live that way long enough, it obviously is going to change how you think and how you process and how you react to situations once you're outside the walls.
Within 3 years of being released. Why is that? You ever watch a prison fight scene in an American movie? Yeah, that's pretty much what these prisons are like. Physical fights between prisoners are extremely common in prisons, and many prison guards actually encourage violence instead of preventing it. If two inmates are stabbing each other, guards are taught to let it happen. There have been countless cases of guards allowing or encouraging fights between inmates for their own entertainment. Along with this, there are strict racial hierarchies that pressure inmates to only side with their own race, and conflicts often brew between races that lead to injury and death.
It's really bad in the West Coast, man. The West Coast prisons are different when it comes to the race wars. They got full on Aryan Brotherhood still. It's crazy.
Guards are also taught to use extreme physical force on inmates. Now, do you think this rehabilitates a criminal, or turns them even more violent and aggressive? When an individual spends years in an environment where they must constantly use violence and aggression to defend themselves and get what they want, they tend to carry that mentality with them after leaving. Constantly being exposed to violence can also induce PTSD symptoms after release, such as anxiety, depression, paranoia, and difficulty with emotion.
I mean, I don't know. I've seen some 60 Days in like episodes. I watch a lot, and I remember one season they brought in a soldier, somebody who was in the military, and he adjusted extremely well. Like, it's crazy that people who go through war get like are like so similar, and like the way of life is so similar to the people in the prison system. Like, I think that shows you that that's a problem. That war and prison at some aspect are extremely similar. You know what I mean? Like, yes, of course, military people can adapt to situations and are pretty good at it. But it's common for soldiers after, war or, be going on tour, being on, stuff like that. They come home different. PTSD, their brain was just trained differently after so much time. It's, you know what I mean? There's definitely a correlation there.
Emotional regulation. These symptoms make it very difficult for ex-inmates to adjust to their life after prison. But violence isn't the only traumatizing factor for these inmates. Slavery is considered bad, right? Well, not in America. The 13th Amendment still allows slavery as punishment for crime. Slavery is a very fundamental function of the American prison system, with roughly 2/3 of all inmates in state and federal prisons being forced to work. On average, these forced laborers earn between 13 to 52 cents an hour, which comes out to basically zero after tax deductions and pay-to-stay fees, as prisoners are forced to pay for their own confinement. These jobs often involve dangerous tasks, and without adequate medical care for injuries. For example, in California, many inmates are forced to fight dangerous wildfires with very minimal training. If inmates refuse to work, they are subjected to solitary confinement, where an inmate is trapped in a single cell for extended periods without human contact. In some cases, prisoners are even forced to listen to Sabrina Carpenter music.
Okay, no,
These
there's
practices
no shot.
can induce severe psychological harm, and 20% of US prisoners experience solitary confinement annually. So what happens when an inmate is released? Most of them are broken, traumatized, have increased aggression, and have not gained any valuable skills or knowledge to help them with their re-entry into society. This is horrible. If you take a look at any other first world country, you'll find that education is a fundamental function of their prison systems. For example, prisons in Norway offer carpentry and agricultural training. Prisons in Finland offer coding classes. Every first world country besides the US offers extensive vocational education to its inmates.
Because America has such a not a problem. I mean, yeah, it is a problem with There's so many of us that are just very much, suck it up, deal with it. Oh well, boo hoo, keep it pushing. We have a lot of us have that mindset, and it is helpful in certain situations. Yes, if there is a person who is just straight violent, there is no rehabilitating them because their brain is ticked wrong or whatever the case is, then unfortunately, yes, we can't really do much besides lock them away. But that's kind of like why we have mental institutions and shit like that, because their brain, it's impossible for them to ever be rehabilitated. But for people who commit like non-violent crimes or very situational crimes, I feel like we need to look at it in like a more specific case instead of such a black and white. Oh, you're a criminal, you get punished, and there's no sympathy for you. And I'm not saying we should feel bad for the people. You did the crime, you do the time. But at the same time, it's literally hurting the us, civilians, you know, when we do this, because when they get sent to the prison and they don't get better, you know what I mean? They don't become better people and they come out worse actually. They're gonna hurt us. You know what I mean? They're gonna hurt a normal family, or just in general, they're gonna hurt somebody or commit again, or you know, it's a recipe for disaster that's gonna keep happening.
Also, this is kind of off topic, but this is what a Norwegian prison cell looks like.
That looks like a college dorm room, like genuinely.
Education programs are essential for prisoners, as many have not yet had a proper education, and unemployment is a very large reason why many commit crime in the first place. According to Brookings, incarcerated individuals participating in post-secondary education programs have 48% lower odds of returning to prison. And this explains why recidivism rates are so high in the US. Only 6% of US inmates have access to college-level education. Many states with massive prison populations, like Florida, have virtually no education system. Prisoners are also unable to subscribe to Humanity, which means they're missing out on a lot of great informational videos.
Hey man, look, I get, plug your shit. We all gotta get our bag. We all gotta, get the numbers up. But sometimes the placement can feel a bit insensitive. Sorry about that. I died coughing real quick.
When the majority of US prisoners spend all their time in mandatory labor, solitary confinement, or under pressure from violence, they have zero time to study for important skills and knowledge they need after being released. Compare this to countries like Norway and Sweden, where not only does nearly every inmate have access to education programs, but education is mandatory in these prisons. It makes sense why only 20% of Norwegian prisoners commit a crime within 3 years of being released.
See, that's insane, man. 40, like, even like just like that small chance, like that booking institute that they were talking about, 48%, that's almost half. That's pretty good, you know what I mean? But Norwegian 20, that's insane. Like, clearly they're onto something. You would think we would, hey, what are you guys doing? What's working so well for you that's not working for us? Let's figure it out. But no.
compared to 68% of US prisoners. Now, everything we've discussed so far makes re-entry into society extremely difficult for criminals, but we haven't even touched upon the most challenging factor, the job application process. In America,
You know, if you have a record, man, good luck, good riddance on getting a job, man.
background checks pose a very large influence on the job market, with almost every employer checking for criminal records. For an individual with a criminal and prison record, it's extremely difficult to secure a job, even if it's a low-skilled job, and nearly impossible to secure a well-paying office job. Even those with minor offenses like a DUI or possession of substances can be permanently disabled from finding a good job, regardless of their competence or educational background. Having a criminal and prison record also makes housing extremely difficult, as background checks are
It makes everything in life outside of the prison system extremely hard. You know what I mean? Like it's like you're saying, hard to get a job, hard to get a like a house. Gonna be hard to get a car. Like because you as everybody else is gonna perceive you as dangerous, unreliable, not efficient as an adult, whatever you want to say, they're just gonna have a tainted view on you as a person now because of it. No matter the situation, even if it was, for example, you were wrongly accused. This is a huge problem in America that people are wrongly accused and committed of crimes and serve the time and never get any retribution from it.
almost always involved in the apartment rental process. Homelessness is a serious and sometimes inevitable threat for those released from prison. So, what happens when hundreds of thousands of people are unemployed, impoverished, traumatized, potentially homeless, and taught to be violent? You guessed it, more crime. Now, the saddest part is that these inmates could have had a good life. These aren't murderers we're talking about. According to the Bureau of Justice, 95% of incarcerated Americans eventually get released from prison. And many of these inmates are incarcerated for minor offenses, and consequently have their entire lives ruined for one wrongdoing. Sure, they may have committed a mistake and need consequences, but these aren't evil people. Most individuals who commit crime are from poverty or are experiencing mental problems, which are both disadvantages they are born into. 37% of inmates have mental illness, and 57% of men and 72% of women in prison come from a background of poverty. Oftentimes, those in poverty are incarcerated because they couldn't afford to pay a fine or couldn't afford the bail, while wealthier individuals are let off the hook because they are able to afford these expenses. To put it bluntly, the justice system is punishing people for being
Look, man, I was told this what like growing up, man, and I'll say it for everybody watching this, man. America is the biggest pay to win, honestly. Like if we took pay to win servers and implement them in a real life, man, America is the EA or whatever of fucking pay to win. If you want to be successful, you gotta be born into money, man. You gotta have money to make money. Like it's sad. It really is.
poor. Of course, poverty and mental illness don't justify crime, but it will be unfair to claim that these individuals simply deserve a cruel prison sentence. If these individuals
Well, because we could also play with the hypothetical of that if they weren't in this situation, if they weren't mentally, had a mental problem or were poor or whatever the situation, whatever it was that drove them, if they weren't in that situation, they most likely wouldn't have committed that crime. It really is a situational thing. Yes, you still have to do the time. You do the crime, you do the punishment. I need to express that right now. Like, if you actually committed a crime, yes, you should have to, reap some type of punishment. But we need to look at it like every case as a case by case situation, man. Because not everybody is this. Like it's with like school, just like with school. Not every kid learns the same. Not every person is the same. We all have our brains are wired differently. Everybody, and every situation is different. It's all a gray scenario instead of it being black and white. It's all gray. So it's hard. It definitely is. It's not easy, you know. And there's always going to be mistakes because humans are just flawed. You know what I mean? We're inevitably going to have mistakes or make mistakes and be a flawed species. But we could definitely put more effort into trying to be better and have a better system, especially in this country.
individuals receive humane treatment and proper rehabilitation during their prison sentence, they can easily readjust and learn to become productive members of society. But instead, we often see people caught in a cycle of incarceration, release, and crime, because the system prevents these people from living proper lives. This is bad for everybody. It's bad for the criminals, bad for the public, bad for taxpayers, bad for the country, and bad for the economy. The only people who benefit from this are the ultra-rich leaders of the prison companies that make a profit with every individual being incarcerated. These companies are privately owned rather than the government, so they have no interest or reason to actually improve the country.
I think
Almost every
I think right there that's a problem. We should outright as a country to give like no, that should be a law that gets passed or whatever where we ban privately owned prisons. They should all have to be state or federally funded and taken care of.
characteristic of a US prison is designed for profit. Because every additional inmate brings more profit, prisons stuff their living quarters to the max, leading to overcrowded and unsanitary conditions. Many prisons are understaffed because hiring less staff means maximizing profit. Coercing inmates into low-paying labor also means massive profit. Anything that doesn't align with this profit model is regarded as useless in the prison system, which is why prisons don't care to invest in important functions like education programs, mental health resources, humane conditions, and well-trained staff.
Bro, these business people are honestly more evil than some of these prisoners. Like, come on, this is sad.
Despite all this, greed wasn't the main reason why the modern US prison system was born. It was actually racism.
Yeah, slavery.
After the 13th Amendment was passed, many southern states took advantage of a new rule, which permits slavery as punishment for crime.
And that's why crimes like loitering and jaywalking exist. It is strictly so that they could have a reason to arrest black people of America and incarcerate them and put them into slave labor once again. It's fucking disgusting.
Incarcerating African Americans for ridiculous reasons like loitering or unemployment, they could obtain free labor, resembling the systems of slavery that existed before the Civil War. By 1898, for example, 73% of Alabama's state revenue came from prison slavery, with the vast majority of convicts being black. As convict leasing faded away in the early 20th century due to cultural and economic shifts, the prison system continued to reflect racial hierarchies. Black inmates were often subjected to harsher conditions, fewer privileges, and more severe punishments than white inmates. Outside of prison, African Americans were stereotyped as violent and criminals, which led to harsher sentencing in black communities. But mass incarceration didn't truly begin until the 1970s, when President Richard Nixon began the War on Drugs campaign, with the purpose to crack down on substance use throughout the US. Despite evidence
I'm sorry, but this was ridiculous because the crack and cocaine or whatever was literally brought in by like America. It was allowed in by America. They let it in and flooded it into poor neighborhoods.
showing that substance use rates were similar throughout different racial groups, the DEA mostly targeted black and Latino communities. Many policies were implemented that punished black communities much harsher than white communities, despite similar substance use patterns. In 1970, the prison population was only 200,000. 30 years later, this population jumped to over 2 million. Now this is all bad, but there's actually very simple solutions that can simultaneously reduce crime and reduce prison costs. Before talking about reforming prisons, we first need to talk about how mass incarceration is a problem in itself. There seems to be this notion where the more people we send to prison, the more safe and crime-free society becomes. But the numbers don't align with this theory. Yes, crime did significantly drop from the 1970s to the 2000s, the same time that incarceration rates skyrocketed. But there hasn't always been this clear linear relationship. From 2013 to 2022, 46 states reduced prison populations while also experiencing crime declines, with Louisiana seeing a 30% prison population reduction and an 18% crime rate decrease. And there's actually a pretty simple explanation to why this occurred. Let's use violent crime as an example. For every violent crime that is committed, roughly 4.6%.
Oh, is he gonna bring up the fact that we don't put it's a lot harder to end up in jail and prison now? Like for example, people who steal have to steal a certain amount now to actually get charged.
Of the perpetrators are actually incarcerated due to many factors that are largely out of law enforcement's control. And this applies to all crime, not just violent ones. Because so few instances of crime lead to arrest and conviction, and most cases go under the radar, maintaining a high incarceration rate can only do so much to reduce the crime rate. The only real and effective solution is to focus on crime prevention rather than punishment. Higher wages, higher employment, higher police presence, and improving law enforcement have been proven time after time to reduce crime. And these changes are largely responsible for the drop in crime we've seen over the last few decades. It will be much more practical to allocate funding towards these areas of society rather than prisons. And even for individuals arrested and convicted for crime, incarceration oftentimes does not fix anything. For example, incarcerating those who sell substances has very little impact, as this role can be easily replaced within a community. For substance possession crimes, treatment and rehab is far more effective than incarceration, and will lead to much safer and healthier communities. In 2019, Kentucky attempted to address its substance use-related issues by spending $402 million on local jails rather than treatment, employment, and housing. The following year, Kentucky had the third highest overdose fatality rate in the US. Building systems upon punishment rather.
How does putting money into jails and prison help out our drug issue? That just doesn't make sense. Like, actually, that doesn't make sense. What the fuck are they talking about? What? Oh, we have everybody in the streets doing drugs and doing the fentanyl and walking around and shit, robbing people and stabbing people, da 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 da, because of drugs and poverty. So here's what we're gonna do. You know what we're gonna do? We're gonna take $402 billion or what, $402 million or whatever the fuck it was, and we're gonna shove it into the prison system. That's gonna do jack shit with it because what can they do? They're not gonna implement anything. Like what? Like, what does that do? Generally, what did they use that money for?
Rather than prevention and treatment simply leads to disaster. The same applies to crime caused by mental health. As it turns out, mental health resources are far more effective in preventing crime than punishment. A study found that 61% of people in Los Angeles jails taking psychotropic medications could be safely diverted to community-based alternatives like supportive housing and clinical support, which are much more effective and humane. Not only that, but these alternatives are significantly cheaper, as jails and prisons have much more complicated expenses to deal with. In Los Angeles, community-based housing and clinical care for individuals with serious mental health needs costs $180 per day, versus $445 to $650 per day for jail. Mass incarceration needs to change, but now let's talk about the changes that need to happen within prisons. First, long-term sentencing needs to be used more carefully, and those who haven't committed unforgivable atrocities should not be given excessive sentences. There seems to be this mentality in the US justice system that the harsher the punishment is, the less likely an individual is to reoffend. But at what point is too much? Research shows that recidivism rates drop significantly after 6 to 10 years in prison, and any sentence longer than that has very little effect on how likely they are to reoffend. Let's say a parent is punishing a child for misbehavior. A certain degree of punishment will be effective in preventing misbehavior, but when punishment is excessive, it doesn't make the child even more well-behaved. In some cases, it does the opposite, making them bitter, angry, and rebellious. The same applies to.
Yeah, actually, that's a really good point because I had made a reaction video a week or two ago, or whatever, talking about gentle parenting. I think it was a video by Dumanity actually, and I had gotten into a debate with somebody in the comments down below, and basically in that video, in case somebody is misinterpreting what I'm saying in that video, I'm not saying that don't punish your kids or whatever. Obviously you need to have some form of discipline growing up and structure, and you know what I mean, you need to have that. But what I'm saying, or what I was saying, is that just like what he's saying right now, is that everybody is different, right? Certain times if you punish somebody, yes, it'll make them more likely to listen, more submissive, whatever the case. In other cases, it'll make them more deceitful, more aggressive, and have a worse outlook on life, and just make them a shittier person in the long run. There's a line that needs to be established that can't be crossed.
To criminals. When we give prisoners excessively long prison sentences, we only worsen their mental problems and waste our taxpayer money on their confinement. Along with this, research proves that people are in their criminal peaks in their late teens and 20s, and that their criminal tendencies decrease significantly after this period.
Yes, that's because at that age you are officially an adult and you're at that age where you can be punished and tried or whatever and put in jail, juvie, prison, all that type of shit. But you're also at that age where your frontal lobe or whatever hasn't fully developed. Your brain isn't there. You're not mature fully. You know what I mean? You may think you are, but you're not. That's a easy science right there. It took me 2 seconds to figure that out.
However, many individuals are serving sentences long after they pass this age period in their lives, meaning they're serving unnecessarily long sentences. Long-term sentencing is harmful, useless, and expensive. Again, I'm not talking about those with unforgivable felonies. Anyone who commits any of these crimes should be locked up forever.
Yeah, no, that's 100% fact. And honestly, you could throw on animal abuse onto there, domestic violence, a couple other of those situations, or a couple other crimes you could definitely throw on there. But getting caught for, some drugs that you're not even selling, that you're just doing it yourself or whatever, you're only hurting. I mean, instead, like, I'm not saying you shouldn't be punished. Not you shouldn't be punished though. You shouldn't be thrown in prison as a punishment. You should be put into rehab, given help, a way so that you can actually get fucking clean. Because what good is it doing if they're gonna get you clean while you're in prison? If that, because I know drugs get smuggled into prison all the time, so you might not even stay clean. And if you do somehow, once you get back out, you're most likely just gonna, in instant you get out, go and find your next score.
I'm talking about the majority of inmates who still deserve a second chance in life. Next, we need to adopt similar education programs in our prisons like those in other first world countries. This involves secondary education to inmates who never finish high school, college-level education, and vocational training to prepare inmates for the workforce. And these programs can't be optional. Every uneducated prisoner must be forced to partake in these programs. I've already discussed why this is crucial earlier, but just how much will these reforms actually cost? Well, on average, it costs $60,000 a year to house a prisoner, and $5,000 a year to provide higher education to one prisoner. Now, if you take into account how higher education drastically decreased recidivism, the amount of money we could be saving by implementing higher education is substantial. According to a study by Rand Corporation, every dollar spent on prison-based education saves taxpayers $5 in future incarceration costs, as educated inmates are less likely to reoffend. This is a no-brainer. By implementing education programs in our prisons, we make society safer, improve the lives of millions, improve our employment rate, and save money while doing so. Finally, the profit system that drives the prison industry must be put in check. There needs to be strict regulations that prevent prisons from neglecting prisoners for the sake of profit. Forced labor should be only used for inmates serving life sentences, or be used as punishment for misbehavior, rather than a requirement for the majority of inmates. Overcrowding and understaffing is a big problem in these prisons, and there needs to be rules set in place that require a certain staff-to-inmate ratio. Guards must also receive extensive training before they can begin their work, the same way any other law enforcement or public service job does. They need to be trained to de-escalate violence and intervene in physical fights. This is essential to create a safe prison environment which rehabilitates criminals rather than escalating their criminal behavior.
American prisons are violent, but you know what else is violent? Me. I'm about to turn violent if you don't like and subscribe right now.
Alright guys, that video...
Oh yeah, also I made a...
That video was incredible, as always. Dumanity delivering absolute cinema masterpieces with these. And honestly, I appreciate, and I'm glad that, he is spreading the messages that he does about these situations. And, because at the end of the day, not a lot of people actually think about this stuff from their day-to-day lives. And even if somebody just sits here and watches this and gives it at least 30 minutes of thought, maybe eventually at some point we'll actually get to see some change and things will get better. Hopefully. I'm hopeful, and, that's pretty much it. That's all I have to say for this. So if you enjoyed, make sure to like, subscribe, put on those post notifications. As always, like I said, the link to the original videos is down in the description below. Go show him some love, and I hope you had a snazzy day. Stay safe, stay snazzy, and stay blessed.